Hey, what's happening, guys? This is the Core 3 from FightingGamesOnline.info, and today we're going to be going over the tutorial for RetroArch. Now, some of you might not be familiar with RetroArch, so I kind of want to just give a quick introduction for it for those who just now learning about this program. Um, so, basically, RetroArch is a front end for another program which is called LibRetro. And of course, LibRetro sort of runs online. I'm not really familiar with how the inner workings of it, but from what I understand, of course, it is like LibRetro. Allows you to have like several emulators. It also runs on video. It also has like video codecs. So it allows you to run multiple things on the RetroArch front end. Okay, so that's kind of the best way that I can explain it. So that's just kind of one of the features is that it can run several emulators, so you don't ever have to come out of the application. You just go into the next emulator and you can just play like that. Okay. The second thing that's great about this application is that it supports several platforms. Okay. So we're talking about Android, iOS. There's also they also support consoles as well. And if you're familiar with like the NVIDIA Shield, that runs on Android. So that's pretty exciting. That the fact that it can support so many things, and that it is emulator. Okay. Now, of course, the biggest thing that, of course, I think is great about RetroArch, to me, is that it runs on a rollback technology. Okay, so if you guys are familiar with the GGPO, if you're familiar with Fightcade, you know that those are pretty big for fighting games because of the rollback technology and the fact that it's focused upon having good inputs when you're playing online. So that's kind of why I want to go over this today. I wanted to do this tutorial because it's pretty complex, I guess. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to take it from the beginning. I'm going to go all the way through with it. Show you how the settings and how you can set this up as best as I can, and then we just hopefully you can take it from there. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I've added the link below in the description box for those that want to follow along, but you don't necessarily have to. So we're going to go ahead and go to the website, which is libretro.com for those that want to join me and follow along here. Okay. So the first thing, of course, we're going to go ahead and do is download a build of RetroArch. We're going to go to downloads. Now, I'm not quite familiar with the assets and the log portion. I kind of like briefly looked in there, but I just can't remember at the moment. But we're not going to worry about that right now. We're just going to go focus on nightly and stable. Nightly is more so, I guess, the latest version of RetroArch. But for this example, I'm going to go with stable because I just want to do like a fresh build. And then we're going to go with the most recent release, which is 1.22. Okay. So of course we're going to be running this on Windows 7. I'm going to be running it on the 32-bit. But as you can see here, you have Android, you have NGC. I'm not quite familiar with what NGC is. You have the OS X, of course, which is the Apple. I don't know if iOS is the same as OS X. Not quite sure how that works. Here you got PSP and you have Wii. And of course down here you got Windows 7 64-bit and of course Windows 32-bit. So my system right now is 32-bit. That's what I'm running on. So that's what I'm going to go with. Okay. So as you can see right here is the download for RetroArch. It's in a 7-zip file. If you have WinRAR, you should be able to um, unzip it. So let's go ahead and click that. so you give it a chance to download. Okay, so once it's downloaded, we just come over here. I don't know if if you're downloaded from a different browser, of course it's going to look a little different. I'm using what's this browser? Chrome, Google Chrome. So it's different for everybody. So let me go ahead and open up the folder. I'm just going to show it here in the folder as to what we've downloaded. And we're going to open it up in WinRAR. Hopefully, if you want to follow along with WinRAR, there's also 7-Zip. That's the actual program that's being that was compressed with this this version. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and extract it. Hopefully, you're familiar with us doing this before, but if not, normally I extract it to the desktop. That's normally where I extract it because that's usually the easiest place for people to find it. Although in this case, you might just want to put it on the local disk. That is kind of, if you're not familiar with using like, your computer manager that shows you all your hard drives here. Basically, it's basically your local disk. Usually that's the C drive. Of course, you can put it on any drive that you would like to, but like I said, I usually do it on desktop because that's usually easier for people to find it. But in this case, I do suggest that maybe putting it on the C might be better. But I'm gonna, for the sake of this example, we're gonna stick to desktop anyway. But that's just something I wanted to add. Okay, so we're actually gonna be coming back to that in just a second. So yeah, so I'll be putting it on the desktop. Of course, oops, kind of missed my opportunity there. Yes, so we're gonna put it on the desktop, and we'll call this, let's see, RetroArch 2.2. For some reason, it didn't say what I thought it was gonna say. But anyway, all right. So. Alright, so that's extracting. Alright, so it's all extracted. So let's go ahead and should be on the desktop now. Let me just minimize these things. Okay. Kind of have to search for it because I have, of course, I've added like more than one, but here it is. Okay, so this is 2.2. So I just want to do a few things before we actually get into the program itself. You're going to notice a few files that I want to point out. One is the cores. This is basically where the emulators are going to be going. If you ever have to, just add an emulator, I just wanted to show you manually, then this is what you're going to put it in, cores. Now, with system folder, from what I understand, if you guys plan to use like PlayStation emulators or Sega CD emulators, of course, if you're familiar with those, you need a BIOS in order to run them. So I believe this is where you put system. I haven't actually had success running it, but that's exactly what I've been told, is that you put it into the systems folder. So just wanted to just point that out there. Okay, so the main one that we're going to be running it through is, of course, the RetroArch exe, the executable file. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so one of the first things, of course, it tells you is to go to help. Now, unlike most emulators and stuff like that, this uses the keyboard interface more so than using the mouse. Okay, so you're not going to be using the mouse pretty much throughout this whole period. And the reason why is mainly because, of course, this is a universal application, and so I guess they did it so that it works with everything across the board. So you can like use a controller and stuff like that. And that's essentially what you're going to do, is kind of set it up so that you can use your controller to navigate through the menu and stuff. Okay, so in order to navigate the menu, you're gonna press basically the keyboard keys, where the down, the arrow keys down, up, and then in order to select an option, you're just gonna press X, and X is gonna select the option. Of course, we're gonna go straight into settings. Of course, actually no, we're not gonna go straight into settings. So you're gonna hit Z to go back. Okay, so Z goes back, X selects. So once you got that, it's easy to navigate. Something I had an issue with when I first started. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is go to the online updater, and the reason you want to do that is because what this will do is allow you to install everything from the program. So that's kind of the benefit of this version. In past versions, you would have to do it manually. Now it'll do it for you automatically, so you don't have to sit there and search for the emulators and stuff like that. Once again, the core is basically what the emulators are. So we're gonna want to get the core first. Okay. So I think for this example, I'm gonna just go ahead and play it safe and go with the SNEX. Of course, you can see here you have MAME, you have Atari. They have there's a couple of them up here. For those who want to watch videos, there's FFmpeg. Nice thing here, Final Burn Alpha, if you're familiar with that. That's what runs on Fightcade. So there's also the Genesis. So let's grab. We're gonna go ahead and grab the SNES for this example. Okay, and I'm looking for the SNES. There are several versions of it. I'm gonna go with the SNES 9X. Pretty popular emulator. All right. Okay. All right. So once you've got that, you hit Z to go back. You also want, I guess, update the info files. There's an info button to kind of tell you what everything is. If you're confused about something, you can hit the info button. I can't exactly remember which one was the info button, unfortunately. But you can find that out. That's all available here. We're gonna go ahead and update the assets. I'm not quite sure. Like I said, once again, not quite sure what assets are. I'm not really as familiar with this program. So we're just gonna go ahead and go through all the updates. Just go ahead and update cheats, update the database, overlays. I think overlays are sort of like I'm not quite sure what overlays. I think they're like say you kind of want to style it in a certain way. They have overlays like a GameCube overlay or something like that. I could be wrong about that. There's also CG shaders, which is like, if you like stuff to look kind of old school, you can do these shaders. They have stuff that kind of give you the scan lines and stuff like that. So if you want to make it look a certain way, you can do that. I'm not quite sure how that would affect online play, but that's something that you can do. And then, of course, you also have this one, but I believe this is for Android. From what I was told, that was Android. Okay. So once you have that done, you can simply just check here. As you can see, if I go to load core, that's basically available. All right. But the next thing I want to do is go into settings. All right. So let's go ahead and go into settings here. Once again, X is to select. For right now, we're using X to select everything. And then, of course, we're first going to go into driver. I don't think anything needs to be touched here. Everything is fine here. Go into core. I believe everything is fine here also. Configuration. Now, most people recommend that you do configuration per core. Of course, when we're talking about core, we're talking about emulator. And of course, each emulator has their own type of buttons and stuff like that. So you might want to do configuration per core for the first part. Okay. So all you have to do is just hit the arrow key to the right, and that turns it on. Okay. Not gonna worry about logging. Of course, next we'll go to video. I always say, if you want to check the frame data, that's always a good thing to do, especially when you're trying to figure out if it's running at 60 frames per second, so that you can play online. So it's something I recommend you do. Of course, you also have full screen mode, which is all. In order to just toggle your full screen mode, you just have to hit F, and that will toggle your full screen mode. So for right now, we're just going to leave that part alone. Let's see here. Let me see. So the only other option that I wanted to kind of go over here was hard GPU sync. And from what I understand, is basically if you feel like your inputs are not adequate enough, you can turn this on. Of course, your hardware might just take a little bit of a beating for it. I don't know exactly what it does, but yeah, it might be at the cost of your performance. So just take that into consideration when you turn that on. I've turned it on, haven't really had an issue with performance from on my end. Okay, so let's hit back. Audio should be okay. I haven't really messed with audio. Inputs. Now, with this one, if you want to go ahead and set up your controller, you can set up your controller easily by doing user bind all. But I'm just gonna, it's gonna, the way that your controller works, of course, and the way that the keyboard works is different. So before you do this, I, suggest maybe just going into input user one and just kind of seeing which keys correlate to what, so you're familiar with your buttons, okay? Because of course you might be using your controller to navigate the program, so that's something that you might want to take into consideration. So you can hit the X button, of course, is what we're using to select. So that's something that you want to make sure that you know which one is the X. I mean, the key, the X key on the keyboard. So of course, you want to just follow along with this, okay? So you get the overall idea of that. All right. So let me keep it moving. Let's see here. Let's go to see, menu. I think it's menu options, or see, the biggest thing I want to go over, not really updated, it was of course the network. Of course, this is where of course you have your NetPlay. Now of course NetPlay is going to be on P2P. It's not going to be server. So just like anything else, you're going to have to put in an IP address. Of course, you just hit right to turn it on. The minute you run the game, you're kind of in the NetPlay mode, and you might just get something to ask you to give permission. So you want to make sure you give permission. Of course, you have to make sure that you have opened your port, and that's the port that you have to open to make sure that you have the correct port. I think actually no, this is the port. It was 55435. Let me see. Also, of course, this depends on if you're the host or if you are a client. Of course, if you are the host, you're just going to give your IP address to the person, and to basically, enable. I think once you're right, only if you're a client, I think, would you enable the NetPlay client, if I'm correct. If I'm wrong, just please let me know. I haven't really gotten a chance to try out the NetPlay as yet, so if if you're interested in testing it out with me, let me know. All right. So of course, once you have gotten that on, you're basically ready to run your game. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention with the game, because that's kind of important, is that it's going to be looking for, it doesn't really have a folder that was created for your ROMs. So basically, you had to create your own folder. And that's kind of why I was saying, you want to, go into your computer manager and kind of maybe put it here, because of course then everything, kind of automatically falls into, into the local disk. I've basically just created a ROM folders here. And the reason I did that was just easier to navigate once I start, once I'm in, RetroArch, okay? And I'll show you that in just a second. All right, so we're going to go ahead and load the core. And of course, we're going to be loading SNEX core. All right, and if you look here to your left, you'll see that the core is loaded. All right, so anytime you want to load an emulator, that's, you just simply go in here and load that emulator. All right, and then in order to run it, you're going to go to load content. Okay, and then of course it says select file. And like I said, once again, I'm going to use the C drive because that's just the easiest one to navigate. Of course, like I said, it's up to you where you want to place your files. You just want to make sure that you can find them when when you've placed them. Okay. Now, of course, there are a few ROMs in here that are not, for SNES. A lot of files are zip files. Of course, you can unzip them if you want to. I would suggest doing that to help you, with any confusion. But of course, it can run zip. Of course, most Super Nintendo files are SMC. And there's also, I think, like SFC also. I think that's another file that is consistent with Nintendo games. All right, so we're going to go ahead and run Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I think in most cases, if you were the host, it'd be waiting until the client had connected, and then, of course, you would start the game normally like you would in any P2P. And then, of course, you'd be able to play through versus battle and stuff like that. All right.
Round one. Fight!
Now you can press F1 to go back. You can also set this up with your controller as well. That was also in input options. One thing I just wanted to point out is if you go back to settings, and then of course go back to your input binds, you'll now notice that the buttons, the user buttons, now correlate with the actual Super Nintendo buttons. So you see B, Y, A, X, L, and R. Okay, so you can set up your buttons now. And of course, I'm still having some trouble with figuring out how to save them individually. But you have to so you can set it up for each one. But basically, that's what you can kind of do to help you with any confusion, especially if you have a game that won't allow you to change your inputs in game. Okay. All right. So I think for the most part, that is going to be it for this explanation. Make sure before you run the game, also, I think another thing I want to add is before you even run the game, you're going to want to probably quit RetroArch. Hold on, because I believe there is a setting that allows you to save the configuration on exit, as you can see here. All right, so make sure because sometimes it does crash, so that that you have your settings saved, so you don't have to keep going back in and resetting your controller. Okay, so you're gonna want to kind of just try out different try out different versions of RetroArch. I found that like an older version of RetroArch works with certain arcade games, than the newer one. Like I said, I haven't really successfully been able to run the PSX or the Sega CD games yet. But I just wanted to get this out here, and I'll just kind of let people know that this is available. And like I said, if you want to you know, help me test stuff out, you know, or get in contact with me, let me know. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and end this here. Like I said, I think this is a great emulator. Hope you guys have fun with this one. Take it easy.